Well, apparently the strategy was not sold well to the people of Sanyang, because I hear you've been written to personally by their legal representative, raising questions about, information sharing and all of that. Some of them claim they were not even informed that their homes were going to be taken by this project.
Well, as I said, we take back the initiative that was done by the consultant. With hindsight, he could have been accompanied by the GPA and also members of the VDC. But ever since, as I said earlier, the VDC, you have quite accomplished Gambians in that VDC that is ably representing the community. You have the likes of the retired Major Momodu Bojang, who served as a cabinet minister in this in the former government. And you have the likes of Dr. Sidi Sanyang, who I think worked in the international arena. And these are people who are quite aware about how such projects are handled in other countries. Yes, there was a breakdown in communication, but when we had a meeting with them at the ministry, which was chaired by our Honorable Minister Ibrahim Asila, the legal counsel, senior lawyer Lamin J. Dabo, was present, and in that we accepted that there was breakdown in communication. But the way we have addressed that is to ensure that anytime we are going into Sanyang, we have a pre-assessment meeting, and this was done. Now, we fan back, try to take back some of the concerns that they've expressed, and then we have now a pre-entry meeting again. So before any consultant goes on site again, we have to meet with the VDC. And what they are requesting now is the communication, rather than just being on phone call to say we have an appointment. We start to document our engagement with them by way of exchanging communication formally. And that is what we're about to do now with the next steps that we expect to engage. And just 2 weeks ago, the independent engineer that the GPA has recruited, the Royal Haskoning of the Netherlands, to assist the GPA in assessing the technical information and so most of the engineering designs that this investor is going to submit, was on site just on a familiarization tour. And we had to call the VDC to accompany them. So they were there together with the investor and this independent engineer to look at the ground and see where the activities need to be started, just as a site visit.
One other complaint of the people who are not happy with their homes seemingly being targeted is that GPA, Al Bayrak, government of the Gambia, avoided a foreign investment real estate company with a large chunk of developed and partly developed land there to take up the homes of ordinary Gambians. How true is that?
Well, it's not an information that I'm aware about, but what we know is that
apparently there's an Indian real estate company that has a big piece of land there, and the entire area is not affected by the port project.
Well, the choice of location is guided by some engineering concerns. And I think what we can say is that Sanyang is endowed. Maybe there's a blessing in the area that was identified. Because we realized that from the preliminary investigation, the bay in Sanyang has what we call maybe a natural channel that leads into where the port infrastructure is envisaged to be sited. What that means is there will be less need for dredging because there will be adequate depth in that area. That's what determined the choice of location, and not that access to land site is the primary consideration. Government is also looking at other options because there's this TDA area, which is beyond the waterline, just to about 800 meters as the information has it. But we are doing our investigations.
Is it what they call Hauba?
Well, I have heard about the name Hauba. I'm not very familiar with the particular location. But what we know is from the layout plan, there's this bay in Sanyang where it has been identified that this is the most suitable place for the port infrastructure because of the less need for dredging. And the channel that leads there, it's like the currents are flowing into that area, and there will be less need for dredging to site the infrastructure. Because the port infrastructure, what it involves is there's going to be like a breakwater, a seawall, to allow for calm waters around where the jetties and the other installations are to be constructed. But by and large, it's not that deliberately we're avoiding taking private property, this Indian real estate property, and going to individual people's homes. That is not what determines the choice of location.
So when can we expect work in Sanyang To begin, if you smooth out all these problems, because officially the concession has come into force.
Well, certainly the investment is envisaged in two areas. Principally, the port infrastructure is what is targeted to be constructed within 2 years after all the engineering designs have been confirmed and the land has been secured. But again, the port infrastructure, as I said earlier, is going to be constructed on sea. So there will be less need to go inland to acquire property. The second lot is where government envisages to build this support infrastructure that will go to add value to this port business. And this is the next lot that people's properties might be affected. But again, from effectiveness, we expect 12 months to complete all the site investigation, property acquisition, and also the detailed engineering designs to be confirmed, and then the investor will start to mobilize. Thereafter, it will take maybe 18 to 24 months to have the first phase in Sanyang complete. So according to our estimation, late 2028, we should see the activity starting to move from Banjul to Sanyang on the first phase.
Okay, and what happens if someone doesn't want to sell their property? Is there any way of maybe incorporating, them in the whole port project in Sanyang?
Well, yes, in one of our interviews, we had actually mentioned that this is not the first time the port is acquiring property. The Banjul Halfday area was typically peculiar in the sense that Banjul is different from anywhere else in the Gambia in the sense that people own land in perpetuity. I think this was because of some colonial legacy that was left. People in Banjul own their homes, the land, in perpetuity. So its acquisition was a little bit more complicated in the sense that people have attachment to their land. So if the negotiations that we had concluded in Banjul is anything to go by, at some point we were saying that with hindsight, when government issued the cabinet instructions in 1993 for the expropriation of that portion of the Halfday to be construed as part of the port expansion project, people could have negotiated that rather than ceding their, rather than getting compensated and move on with their lives, they could have put a value on the land and the structures and then cede it as equity in the business so that there will be continuous earning. So these are one of the options that people who own property in Sanyang can actually look at. Rather than selling off and moving on, the values can be placed on the property and then transposed into equity in the business, meaning they will own shares into whatever business is going to be constructed. Because remember, the special economic zone and the free zones are not part of the investor's concession scope. These are outside of the scope, and this is what government earmarks for local content, to involve more of local Gambians and local champions to invest so that some of these businesses can accrue to Gambians for income generation and wealth creation.
So what happens when, the main activity moves to Sanyang? All that extra land, you have taken from half-dyers and half-dye. What happens to all that land when you have less need for Banjul and the expanded port, thanks to maybe, Sanyang being as successful as envisaged?
Well, yes, the whole area in Banjul where the port facility is sited is about 23 hectares, if I remember the figure rightly at the top of my head. But what we intend to do is if the activity moves to Sanyang, almost about 75% of that area would now be transformed into property development for real estate, to develop a cruise and marina. And 25% is what will be retained to serve our river transport. Now, as you said, Halfday, there would be an opportunity for reborn, because once the property development is developed, the people who own homes there maybe can negotiate and be given a right of first refusal or first choice to come back and buy back their properties, so that the area will be reborn, not Halfday anymore.
And everything is maybe for now, because nothing like that was written into the contract, so that people don't hear this and think, oh yeah, if they decide to develop the place and sell off, we'll have a right of refusal.
Well, no, why I say right of first refusal, because what is also advantageous in this concession agreement is that the fixed assets of the port in Banjul remain property of the Gambia government and GPA. It's not part of what is ceded into the concession arrangement, in the sense that the concession partner does not have the mandate to take the title and place it maybe as collateral for securing any debt financing. It remains the property of government. What they are allowed is right of use. So once the activity transfers to Sanyang, the property still belongs to government and GPA. And our plans is to redevelop that area for property development, because we will not need that 23 hectares just for river transport. That's why I say there's this opportunity for people to come back and maybe regain their former homes to preserve the family's heritage.
Mm-hmm. So officially, Al Bayrak is in business in the Gambia since what, last Monday, is it? What's happening? They've taken over the operational aspect of GPA, haven't they? I mean, what does that involve?
Well, what it involves is they will invest in the construction of the new container terminal. This is the 18,000 square meter contiguous zone of the port that we have recently acquired, and construct a new container terminal, procure new equipment, and invest in the digitalization project, just to turn around the efficiency in Banjul, whilst the engineering investigation is being done for the construction of the facility in Sanyang. It's the management and the operations of the port, but the GPA remains as the landlord to supervise and regulate the concession arrangements. All other third-party contracts and mandatory functions of government, like GRA, for example, will remain in place, because the concession partner is not there to get involved in some of the statutory functions, because these are mandatory functions of the state, and they would have to respect that, and they are committed in the contract to ensure that those third-party contracts and arrangements and the mandatory functions remain in place. Now, Al Bayrak, since we signed the concession contract in July, we had a 6-month conditions precedent in which both parties had certain obligations to fulfill. And as we speak, they have been substantially met. And in between...
Only substantially met, not fully met?
Well, substantially...
How much remains?
We're almost 87% compliance in terms of the fulfillment of the obligations. But key critical issues remain, which should bring closure to these conditions precedent items. And one of them fundamentally is to enter into a shareholders agreement, because the concession contract is modeled along the lines of a grantor and a shareholder. What we signed was the concession agreement, where we ceded the port for management and operations. But again, because we're a shareholder in the business, we need to agree on a shareholders agreement. And that is what is still being negotiated. With
was that not putting the cart before the horse?
Well, no, not necessarily.
You thought you'll sort out the financials before anything else?
Well, the shareholder arrangement is not only dealing with financial. There's a lot of legal compliance issues, transfer of staff, and payment for our movable assets, which we have negotiated successfully with the investor. And to ensure that the payments are received and the staff transfer is done, and then some of the investments in Banjul, the net profit in Banjul is what we have agreed that a percentage of that, what constitutes net profit, on the gross income, would be put in an escrow account for investment in Sanyang. What we have agreed is to ensure that no party receives dividends from the business in Banjul during the 6 years. So all the benefits, percentage of it, would be put in an escrow account as reserve funds. So these are the funds that we are going to use to invest in Sanyang. It's just to show that both parties are committed and obligated to fulfill the Sanyang project.
Do you have a Turkish counterpart, MD? Will you have eventually, if you don't already have?
Well, the business is run as an SPV. It's an Alport company, which is separate from the GPA. So the GPA will still remain as the landlord with its regulatory functions. So it's not like having a counterpart MD. But Alport is a special company that will have its own governance structure, its own board, its own management, and its own staffing. So what we have agreed is to have the staff, the operative staff, transferred under this new company so that there will be job security and improved welfare conditions. But the GPA will remain, I can say at the top of my head, out of a staff strength of about 1,250, almost about 931. These are all staff that are involved in the operations, will be moved to the new company. So GPA will be left with barely 300 odd staff that will continue, because these are support departments that are not necessarily involved in operations, so that we can continue our regulatory functions to make sure that the concession partner fulfills its obligations that they are committed in the concession agreement.
Just in conclusion, do you think the people in Sanyang affected by this planned, real estate takeover would have been assured by your words this morning?
Well, I would encourage them to be reassured because we're not doing this project alone. This is a national project. And because Sanyang is the community where the project is to be sited, they will be ably represented by their VDC. And to address this breakdown in communication, we have 3 layers of governance in terms of our oversight functions as a government. There's the GPA that deals with the concession partner on a daily basis as the contracting authority. The second layer we have is the steering committee, and this is chaired by the permanent secretary, the Minister of Transport. And this is where you have all the relevant government stakeholders represented, from Minister of Finance, Minister of Justice, and Minister of Lands and Regional Administration, Minister of Tourism. You have GIPA and other relevant stakeholders. So the ministry has issued instructions that this Sanyang VDC to be allowed to nominate representatives to serve at that level, which is the steering committee. So if they're represented at the steering committee, be rest assured that all their views and concerns will be addressed because they're going to be like partners to accompany this project. So they will not be left out in the engagements. So the third layer, obviously, is the cabinet subcommittee that provides that oversight over this concession arrangement. So Sanyang will be ably represented. And we are comforted with the fact that the VDC, as I said earlier, you have some well-accomplished Gambians in that VDC who have had experience dealing with projects of similar nature. And we're hopeful that the engagements, once the concerns are expressed by an LOA and they're represented by senior counsel lawyer Lamine Dabo, they should be assured that all their views and concerns will be addressed as we move along in this project. Well, and then the other thing I would want to encourage them is to understand is that our sensitization outreach program is going to be sustained and comprehensive. It's not like we just exchange letters or go on air and make certain statements, but we'll be actively engaged on the ground to talk to each and every PAP, that is the project affected persons, to ensure that their views are taken on board and they participate in the project, and also to look at the situation where some of the ancillary business that goes to support the port infrastructure, they will have the natural endowment in the sense that they are on the area. So all other businesses that spring up to support the business would be to their advantage. So I am hopeful that with the proper engagement, they will be more than committed to ensure that the project sees fruition for the national benefit, and particularly for the benefit of Sanyang, which, as I said, from the Google Map investigation, we know with certainty that maybe we're endowed with divine blessing, that there's a natural channel that flows into that bay in Sanyang.
Fantastic, fantastic.